Options are contracts that we can use to lock in the opportunity to lease or purchase a property in the future. We're going to look at 3 scenarios that use options, and stick around because the last scenario is lease with an option to buy, a popular options contract with renters who want to become owners. We're going to close out with a brief discussion of the 4 most common misconceptions when it comes to using options. The 3 scenarios we're going to cover are going to be purchasing raw land with an option. We're going to be talking about how to purchase a home with an option. And of course, number 3 is lease with an option to buy. Quick disclosure, we are not providing any legal or tax advice in this presentation. If you're considering an option or any other kind of real estate contract, we recommend you speak with a qualified real estate broker or an attorney before entering into any real estate contract. An option agreement is a written contract that defines the terms of the option, how much the option will cost, whether the payments are to be made up front or over time, and also the beginning date and the expiration date for the option. It will incorporate by reference the purchase agreement or lease agreement, whichever is applicable, that will be put in place if the option is exercised. There are a lot of other details. If you're here in California and you're working with a broker, they may run out California Association of Realtors Form OA, which contains all the information needed to put an option agreement in place. Our first scenario is using an option contract to buy raw land to develop. This is actually the most common way that developers buy land because they want to make sure before they put down the big bucks to actually take possession of it that they can build on that land what they want to build. And so by getting an option contract in place, they now have time to conduct all their preliminary investigations, such as confirming the zoning, doing a site inspection, including any soils or industrial hazards that might be present. They also want to put together a site development plan that includes grading, how utilities will be installed, where the streets will go, and of course they want to submit to the building department preliminary plans for the houses that they intend to build because they want to make sure that they can actually build those specific types of homes on that specific kind of land. If at any point during that process they hit a roadblock and they can't get an entitlement that they need, they'll have the option to pull out of the deal. If everything goes as expected, well, then they can go ahead and exercise that option, take possession of the land, and begin their development. Our second scenario shows how we can use an option agreement to purchase a home. In this scenario, John and Mary live in California and they want to move to Tennessee, but they can't afford to own homes in both states at the same time. And they don't want to put their home on the market in California with a contingency that they will not close escrow on that sale until they find another home somewhere else, because that kind of contingency scares away buyers. Well, they go on a trip to Tennessee and they're looking around at homes and they find one they really like. And to solve their problem, they make an offer using an option contract. And in that contract, it says, we'll give you the purchase price you want, all the other terms that you want. All that we want is a 6-month option period so that we have time to sell our home in California. Well, in the scenario, the seller is happy to do it because not only is he getting the price he wants, but he's also getting the option payment as compensation for holding his property off the market for that 6 months, potentially. Well, in our happy ending, we have John and Mary go back to California. They are able to sell their home in 3 months. And the day after escrow closes, they contact the seller and exercise their option to purchase the Tennessee property, and they're on their way to Tennessee. Our third scenario is lease with an option to buy. And it can be a little more complicated than a purchase option, but we'll try to keep it simple here. In this scenario, we have a tenant who would like to buy the home they're living in, and the landlord would like to sell it to them. But the tenant isn't ready to buy right now for whatever reason, so they ask the landlord if they will agree to an option period. They both agree. They enter into a lease with an option to buy contract, and the plan is for the next year, the tenant will continue to occupy the property and pay rent each month according to the lease. According to the lease option contract, they're also going to pay an additional amount every month, which is the option fee. Now, during the option period, if the tenant decides to exercise the option and make the purchase, they notify the seller, the landlord, and they go into escrow and they make the transaction close. And on closing day, the lease goes away because now the tenant is an owner. But let's say, as an alternate ending, that the tenant was not able to exercise the option, and at the end of 12 months the option expires. Well, what happens then? Well, the tenant continues to go on being a tenant according to the lease or an extension of the lease. And if they want to buy the property, they're going to have to start all over again. But that's how a lease option to buy generally works. Now, there are many, many variations, as with any real estate contract. One of them that we hear about quite a bit is that a certain portion of the monthly payment for the option will be applied to a down payment on the property when it goes into escrow. Well, in some scenarios, none of the option payment will be used as a down payment, and in some, maybe a portion of it, and in others, maybe all of it. You just never know. It's all open to negotiation. So those are our three scenarios. And before we go, I'm going to share with you 4 of the most common misconceptions about purchase and lease options. So the first misconception is, as I just talked about with the third scenario, lease option to buy, is that the option amount is always applied to the down payment on the purchase, and whether you're doing a straight purchase or a lease option. Well, that's always open to negotiation. Most of the time, an option payment is a compensation to the seller for taking the property off the market, and therefore it's a fee that you pay. It is not part of the down payment, but again, it's always open to negotiation. Misconception number 2 that I hear sometimes is some buyers think that if they don't exercise their option to buy, that they get their option fee back. No, it is not a security deposit. You don't get it back if you pull out of the deal. It might be possible that you can get a portion of it back if you cancel soon enough after you go into escrow, and you might be able to negotiate that, but in general, no, you don't get your option fee back. Misconception number 3, that the underlying purchase agreement can't be changed during the option period. Well, while the purchase agreement attached to the option or incorporated by reference into the option contract is certainly a contract, if during the option period the buyer is doing their inspections of the property and they find information that changes or has a great effect upon the value of that property in their particular use, they do have the right to try to renegotiate that contract. If the seller says, no, I'm not going to renegotiate, I'd rather walk away, then they just walk away, and the buyer will probably just let the option expire. However, if both of them, the buyer and seller, want to close the deal, they can renegotiate as long as the terms are mutually acceptable and written into a revised contract. And misconception number 4 is that a lease with an option to buy is a good way for a buyer with bad credit to get into a home. Well, that's not really true, because most landlords/sellers are going to check to make sure that the tenant/buyer is qualified to get a mortgage before they enter into a lease option contract. Especially true if that seller is represented by an agent who is looking out for the seller's best interest. Now, we do see transactions where the seller says, well, you've been a tenant for a long time, you have a great rent payment history, you've taken care of my property, I'll take you on a handshake. However, they enter into the agreement, and then 6 months down the road, the tenant goes down to the bank and says, hey, I need a mortgage so I can exercise my option. And the bank says, well, you're not qualified, you have bad credit, you have not enough income, you don't have a down payment, whatever the case might be. And the whole deal falls apart because the tenant/buyer cannot qualify for financing. So it does happen, but in general, most cautious sellers are going to require documentation of good credit, good income before they will enter into a lease with an option to buy contract. Hope you found this information about options agreements interesting and helpful. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them. We cannot answer any questions about specific transactions. If you have questions like that, please consult with a qualified real estate broker or an attorney. This is John at Cordon Real Estate. Please like, subscribe, and we'll see you again soon.